Okay, so let's start the Epic Games Launcher and then go to Library. Launch the latest version of the engine, 4.23.1 in my case. Wait for it to load, it should be rather quick. Then we go to New Project, scroll down to VR and Virtual Reality, and let's call it VR Interact. Create project. Few seconds for the editor to fully load and show us the VR template. Okay, let's show the folder, the content. This means the plugins. And then inside Virtuality BP, there's a maps folder. We want to go to the motion controller map. So we open this one. Okay, now that we're here, let's import the asset for our button. So right click on content, new folder, button, import. Now we scroll to Blender, because I created my button in Blender, and I will hand over this asset to you. Of course, you can try by yourself. VR button, open. Let's confirm the default. Just make sure that file unit centimeters, import. Okay, give the shaders a moment to compile, and should see the button soon. In the meantime, we go again on content, and just to say organize, we create a blueprints folder. And inside this folder, we right click, blueprint class, actors. We want to create a new blueprint actor. We call this BP VR button. Takes fair name. And now we open it with double click. And we go back to the button folder and 1 and 2. So we shift click on the two assets and we drag them inside so that they are added automatically to this BP. I would like to change the names. I think VR button base, VR button doesn't sound very good. So F2 to rename them. Yep, so I think it's an extra. Yeah, and then the second one, F2, that's also perfect. Okay, so now we have the base blueprint with, you see the button has, well, the push part and the base part. Okay, so what we want to do with it, let me switch to PowerPoint. And basically, we're going to start with the button in its default position. And as the hand approaches it and starts to interact with it, we detect the begin overlap. So as we detect the begin overlap between the hand and the button, we start tracking the button. The hand will move down in the direction of the button as to push it, and we keep tracking it until the button gets to its final stage as a maximum travel. And at that point, from the button, we can trigger an event. Okay, the button has been fully pushed, open a door, or do something else. Now, from there on, we let the button release and go back to its initial state. It might also happen that someone doesn't press the button all the way to the end, but basically takes the hand away from the button. So in that case, we also want the button to go back to its initial state. In both cases, so fully pressed or end of the overlap, the button is back to initial state and it's then ready for the next interaction. Okay. So how we do that? Let's go back to our blueprint event graph. Let's clean it up, even though we will need again the event begin play and tick event later on, but nevertheless, let's clean it up. Let's select a button here, and then on the details panel, we scroll down all the way where it says on component begin overlap. And we click the green plus button, and we automatically get the component begin overlap event. Now we want to detect the overlap with the hand, and the hand in this template is called BP motion controller. So we cast out of other actor, cast to BP motion controller. So in that case, we are sure that we are interacting with the hand. and we want to store this variable. So right click, promote to variable, ref to MC. So this is a reference to the motion controller that we are tracking. And by the way, this is wrong. We want to get the motion controller out of it. Sorry about that. And that's the one that we want to store a value for. So right click, promote the variable, tracking motion controller. Let's delete this one, we don't need it. Because we don't want to track the full BP, but only the motion controller component, which is contained into it, okay? Sorry, my bad. Okay, so now that we have a reference to the motion controller that we are tracking, let's also keep track of it with a Boolean variable. So I pressed on the variable, Boolean, we call it is tracking, and we drag it out and check it. So it's set to true. Now the next thing that we want to do in this initial state is what two things. First of all, we want the position of the motion controller. So we want to get the word location of the motion controller and also save it as a variable. We call it MC initial location. Drag down and connect it. And we want to do the same with the button. So drag out the button, same word, get word, oops, word location. Right click, promote to variable, button initial location. Okay, so now we have all the initial conditions that we need in order to track, to understand where we are when the button, the overlap begins. So how do we track the button from the hand? Well, we need event tick. First of all, let's make sure that we are tracking. So we do a branch and use the is tracking as a control to that branch. So only if we are tracking. Well, we do a few things. Basically, we want to take the initial position of the motion controller. So tracking MC. Sorry, not initial position, but the current position. Get word location. And we want to subtract it from its initial position. So it's a vector minus vector, motion controller initial location. So basically this represents the displacement of the motion controller from the initial location to the current location. Now what we do is, since the button can only move along its axis, and its axis, if we look at the viewport, is its up vector, it's the blue one, so that's its up vector. We basically drag the button out, get up vector, so we get this up vector, and then we use a very handy node which is called project vector onto vector, and we basically project the displacement of the hand on the up vector of the button. So basically we are only taking the movement of the hand, the component of that movement that is along the button. Now I see a question popping up is, okay, can you also use transforms? Yes, you can also use transforms. So basically you can transform the word movement of the hand into the local space of the button and then take the Z coordinate of that translation, and that will work anyway. But I find working with transforms for beginners is a bit more complicated than working just with vectors, so we're gonna stick to vectors. Let's take the length, because we want the length of the displacement, and just to make sure that it only goes in a positive direction, we take the abs value. And then we clamp this with a clamp float between 0 and its maximum displacement. How do we find the maximum displacement? So we go back here, and by the way, let's put the snapping to 1 for translation. So if I drag down, maybe you want to go at this level a bit more. Yeah. So -7, so it means 7 units that the displacement that the button can have. Let's put it back to where it is, where it was, sorry. So event graph, I think this is a 7. So that's the maximum displacement that the button can get before we recognize that it's fully pressed. By the way, let's turn this into a variable, promote a variable, and we call it maximum travel or displacement. Yeah, that's all fine. And by the way, this quantity is the current travel of the button. So let's also promote this variable, current travel. Okay. So what we do with this variable is out of the true here, and let's keep ourselves organized. We want to set the button now to its new position because it's tracking the hand, so it has to move with the hand. And the way to do it is basically to take the upper vector of the button, multiply this up vector by the current travel. And remember the up vectors as forward or right vectors, these are unit vectors. So we multiply that by the current travel. And if we subtract this from the button initial location, we basically have the new location of the button in workspace. And that's where we can set it. Let's drag it a bit to the right. So out of the button, we say set the word location. And we set the word location to this one. Okay, so basically this is the new word location of the button. Let's keep it a bit cleaner. This is basically where we want to place the button as it's following the hand. By the way, let's turn this into a variable as well, because we might want to track it. So we'll say button current location. We need that. I think it's useful because then we can use it to compare the current location with the initial location, and we can use that for example to see if the button has gone back to its initial state. But anyway, so we have the current location, and so this makes the button now slide. By the way, we could I think already give it a try. So let's see whether that works. At least if the button starts tracking the hand and then moves with it. We have nothing that says stop tracking it. So basically the hand will be stuck with the button, but that's fine. Or the button stuck with the hand, whatever. Okay, let's give it a try. So first of all, we have to take our blueprint and place it somewhere in the level. Let's place it here on the table. I think that's good because we can easily get there and test it. Yeah, let's see. So I'm going into VR preview mode and grab my motion controllers. And let's see if we get there. Yeah. So let's go back to the editor. And if we touch the button, we should already see that it tracks the hand. But you can see that it never stops tracking it. Nevertheless, it's reacting. I think now it went basically into the table. Okay, so let's get out and back to our motion controller. Oh, sorry, to our blueprint. Okay, so basically here what happens is we can check now if the button is fully pressed, and basically we can do it because if it's fully pressed, then current trouble is greater or equal to the maximum trouble. It will not get past the maximum trouble because we will stop tracking then. And when that happens, there are a few things that we can do. I like to create an event. I like to create a custom event. So right click, custom event, and we call it fully pressed. So basically that's an event that we can use to do something if the button has been fully pressed. So one neat thing to do when the button is fully pressed is to change its color, for example, to make it glow. Now to do that, let's quickly go back to the button and take the button material. And that's how it came in from Blender, which is fine. Basically, we can use an emissive color. So if I take here, drag out of the color pin and then do a multiply, connect it to emissive. And then you see this B. Basically, this is a multiplication factor. And what we can do is right click and say promote to parameter. And now this B will become a parameter which we call glow. So we will give it the default value of 1, which basically makes the button look like this. Give it a sec because the material has to compile. And if we set it to 10, for example, that will make the button glow. Now, how we can apply this to the button? Let's go back to our blueprint, button blueprint. And on begin play, so type begin play, good. We're going to take the button and create a dynamic material instance. Create dynamic material instance. And we are going to use the button material as a source. And the element 0 is fine because it's the only one that we have. So compile and save. And what we're going to do next is go back to our event tick. So here we are in the condition that the button was fully pressed. By the way, here we can call the fully pressed event, which we just created. So that's where we're going to go once the button is fully pressed. And from there, we can take our material instance. And by the way, in order to be able to operate with the material, we need to track it with a variable. So let's call it material instance button. Good. Now back down. We take the material instance of the button and we set scalar parameter value. And you remember we call the parameter glow and we set its value to 10. By the way, we could also turn this into a variable. Right click, promote to variable. We call it glow intensity in case we want it to glow a bit more, a bit less. Okay, now if everything is working as expected, we should be able to go to our material, our button, and as we bring it all the way down, you see that it glows. Cool. Okay. Now what we don't do yet is stop the tracking. So we said that once the button is fully pressed, we want to stop tracking it. So we put is tracking to false, and we also want it to return to its initial state. So in order for that to happen, so once we are in the event tick, it's tracking now it's false, so we're going to go onto this branch. and we can use another branch, and we need another condition, which is returning. Why we need that? Because we don't want to, the player, to be able to interact with the button while that's returning. So we create a new Boolean variable called isReturning, and in here we set it to true. So basically now the button is returning to its initial state. We track it here, and what we can do is basically take the button from the current location, whatever it is, because we can use that also later when we want to manage the end overlap, and bring it back to its initial position. So one way to do it is to, so we have the initial location of the button, it's here, and we have the current location. So basically we take the initial location of the button, we take which is the target, we take the current location, which is where the button is right now, and we use a nice function called vinterp. So this is vector interpolation 2. So basically from the current location, which is this one, to the initial location, which is our target, with we need to use a delta time out of tick, but I think this is too long to connect, so I'm gonna use the same, which is called get word delta seconds. Same thing. It's gonna give us a delta time. And as interpolation speed, well, let's put 2, and then we'll see. I mean, we can turn this into a variable anyway, and call it button return speed, something like that. Okay. So what we do with that is, we have now to update the current location of the button, so that we can keep doing the vinterp every time we come back to it. And now we say vr button set word location. Make sure you connect it to location. And basically, once we do that, we want now to detect branch if the current location, as we are moving the button back to its initial location, is identical, and we use equal exactly for these two vectors, the button initial location, then the button is no longer turning. So we have basically done it, and since it's no longer tracking and no longer returning, basically we are back to the initial state where another tracking and returning can happen. Okay, let's try it out, and basically let's see what happens. Okay, so here we are again, oops, with our button. So we move there and press it, and as you can see, it comes back, and we can press it again, we can press it again, we can press it again, and it then comes back to the initial position. Now what it doesn't do is it doesn't stop glowing, and well, that's basically something that we can make happen either here. So do we want it to stop glowing immediately? Do we want it to for example, one thing that we can do is put a little delay here, 0.2 seconds, and then we can do the same. So basically change the scalar parameter from the material instance and bring it back. I think it was 1. So that's the initial glow. Okay. Let's see if this time this stops glowing as it should. Yeah, so it glows, and then as you see, it only glows when it's fully pressed. Actually, I don't like it. I think it should glow until it comes back to the initial state, if I may. I'm not gonna put that one there. Yeah, with the delay, I don't like it. I think we can put it, at the end of the return. So basically, when it has returned all the way to the top, it will stop glowing. I think that's better. Nice. So what else is left? Basically, we said earlier that we might want the button to also go back to its initial position when the overlap with the hand stops. So someone has not pushed the button all the way through, but they move the hands away, so they change their mind. So basically, we can do the same here. We take the button, click on it, go back to the details, and this time we click on component and overlap. Okay, and what we do is, same deal. We want to cast to BP motion controller just to make sure that we are dealing with the motion controller, and then we take the motion controller out of it, so the component, okay, and we compare it with the current one that we are tracking. And actually see them here under components of tracking, motion controller component, and basically we say, well, if with a branch that is true, so the end overlap comes exactly from the same motion controller we are tracking, we stop tracking and trigger a return. Yeah. So basically that will then bring us in the same branch that we were in before. Let me move this down because I don't like it. And will take us here. It's returning, and then it will bring back the button from the current location all the way to the initial location. And once it's there, it will set it, to stop glowing, but it never started glowing in the first place here, so that will do nothing basically. Okay, let's give it a try. I think it needs to return a bit quicker. So now you see that if I take my hand away, basically the button goes back to its initial state, but doesn't glow, so there's no trigger of for it. And actually we have a bug here where the button has taken a new initial state, and I know where that comes from. So basically we didn't allow the button to go all the way back, but basically we interacted with it and created a new overlap while it was still going back. So if we go here, we go back to our blueprint. Basically, we don't want a new overlap to be happening if we are still tracking or returning. Okay, so what we're gonna do is move this a bit to the side, and we're gonna put a branch in here, and I like it to be clean. So let me do this perfect. And we say, well, if if we are already tracking, or we are returning, basically we don't want to be able to detect the new tracking. So basically let's do it the other way around. So we say if we are not tracking and we are not returning, then it's okay to start a new tracking. While we're tracking, already tracking, or we are just returning, we don't want a new tracking to start. So we'll stick to that. Basically, that's the button will no longer interact in that time span. The other thing I want to change is the return speed of the button. I think it should be quicker, so let's put it to 5. And let's give it another try. Let's see. So here we are with our button again. Let me face it, it's easier. Let's see. Click, up, done. Click, up, done. Click, but not all the way. Oops, gone. Click, done. Click, done. Yeah, then you have it. Of course, we can use, for example, blueprint to blueprint communication, or we could trigger something from that button. And one way to do it, for example, is to use an event dispatcher, or we could simply invoke a function from another blueprint and have it open a door, or I don't know, open a secret compartment, or whatever you might need in your game. All right, thank you so much. I hope this was useful, and see you in the next tutorial. Bye.